the start of 2021, England and Australia will most likely have separate international teams in completely different countries playing separate series at the same time. England are in advanced talks with Pakistan over a T20 series, and that would take place in January, when they're also scheduled to be playing test matches in Sri Lanka. Australia have agreed to play a T20 series in New Zealand next February, whilst simultaneously playing a test series in South Africa. Well, one person who isn't happy is the famously patriotic Australia coach Justin Langer. He says he doesn't like it at all, saying he doesn't want to ever have two Australian teams playing at the same time. He says, we're one country, aren't we? The counter-argument, though, is also pretty persuasive, because the biggest source of revenue for international teams is a tour by one of the big three nations of India, Australia and England. That's because of the high premium on selling those matches to broadcasters. And, you know, we are in parlous financial times. If those rich and powerful countries can be in two places at once, then is that not a way of spreading the wealth? Jim?
It's all about television and revenue. And as long as they rule the world of sport, you'll have decisions like this. The only way you're going to stop it, and it's not going to happen, is to have no T20 played by countries, only by IPL and every other franchise around the place. And that's not going to happen. So I'm sorry, it's inevitable. We're already moving towards having separate identities playing T20, white ball cricket to some extent, although there's more of an overlap with the one-dayers and the test team. So unfortunately for Justin Langer, I think it's inevitable. It's just the shape of the game. It demands to get money from somewhere, and this is a perfect way to do it. So as long as television, as I say, is running sport, this will happen.
Well, television is, of course, a very important arm, commercial arm of sport, Jim. But, you know, I do feel that the top few teams have enough talent to have at least two, if not three, national teams. And I know this is not new, because there are, say, the A tours. Now, India A goes and plays somewhere else, and they're perfectly capable of playing against some of the, no disrespect, lesser nations in cricket, and yet come out on top. So this, in a sense, is already happening with the A tours. If it were to happen legitimately, as in the Indian team going to a lesser nation, which may have only one or two of the major stars, because there's no point sending a team that the locals are not aware of. So if India is playing in, say, Ireland or any other smaller nation, or Malaysia, which, of course, I think the bigger teams owe these smaller nations, then it's possible for just one or two stars to be a part of the team and yet go and represent India. Because if that's going to churn local interest and get some kind of local revenue and take the game forward, I think the players, I mean, again, Justin, you know, you have your own view, but the players need to understand that the game will always be, this is going to sound very cliched, the game will always be bigger than just the players. So to my mind, it's a very effective way forward to create a little bit of sporting interest, if not commercial interest, in the lesser nations by having the major nations go with a separate team. But I will add a caveat that, you know, there should be at least one or two hugely recognizable people in those teams. Otherwise, it might defeat the purpose.
Well, this is the issue. Which team do which players play in? You know, different countries have different arrangements, don't they, contractually between test teams and so on. And it's easy at the moment to say, for example, with England, that they would send sort of their, you know, full strength test team, as what happened in the summer. And then those who didn't make the test team, if they're also white ball players, can play in the white ball matches. But what happens when, for example, this is in the lead up to a T20 World Cup? Are the Ben Stokes and Jos Butlers going to be content to go and play in a test series when they really want to be gearing up for, you know, a T20 World Cup, and T20s are happening at the same time? Is this the start of a slippery slope towards eventually the test teams becoming depleted?
I think so, yes. I mean, look what's happened in rugby in the last 7 or 8 years. You have definitive 15-a-side players and also 7-a-side players. Completely different structures. And they don't have the franchise system that cricket has with T20. But I think there'll be more specialisation, yes. And the players will go to where the money is.
And if a player wants to put themselves in the frame for the IPL, they'll want to be playing international T20 cricket when there's an opportunity to be on a platform.
Are we going to leave it to the players to choose, or are there selectors for different teams and different formats? So I really think you have to leave it to the selectors and their wisdom of choosing those who are most capable for one format and not the other, and then go with it. If you have a problem, step out and play hockey or whatever. I mean, come on, let somebody run the game, because yes, the players are the stars, but so often we have a selection problem, don't we? A sort of a rock and a hard place about, oh gosh, how do we choose 14 people to go when there are 25 candidates? So choose the ones who are in best form, or whichever other criteria you're using, and the others who always land up cribbing about the fact that they weren't selected, or of course it creates a huge social media storm about their lack of selection, can certainly represent the country in either a different form with a different country at the same time. So the more the merrier, but the overarching concept is to aid the development of cricket in other nations, which is suffering. I mean, India, Australia, England, maybe a bit of South Africa, a couple other countries, and nobody's really interested in. I mean, very famously, Jim, when was the last time Australia went to Bangladesh or Bangladesh to Australia? I mean, come on, they're a reasonably strong, enthusiastic cricketing nation, but such few opportunities with the bigger teams. Yes?
I agree with all of that, but there's 365 days in the year, and it just doesn't seem to be enough time to play against everybody in every competition in T20 one-day cricket and test matches. So that's the commercial reality when you've got particularly the major countries getting at least 95%, if not now 100% of their revenue from television deals. And maybe the ICC have got, in order to sustain the game, to give out more of their largesse to the countries that need it. But you've got a big problem now, since Afghanistan and Ireland have also come into the top league, of making this thing work. And it's not working. And we're about to see that with the alleged staging of the World Test Championship. Now they've had to halve the points or something to try and come up with an outcome in time for a final.
Oh, maybe the lure of the World Test Championship is a reason why countries will still try to pick their strongest test team first. But there's an issue around, isn't it, the product of test cricket. If you get to a stage where countries are playing each other without their strongest suits, when you compare the two, which products will suffer more from, say, A teams playing? I mean, test cricket over 5 days, you need and want the best against the best for those one-on-one duels to really draw you in the intensity of the battles. Whereas you can argue that a 2020 can still be entertaining with players who are less heralded, and over a shorter period of time isn't impacted as much in terms of the quality of the product as a test match can be if you take away those top tier of players. So there's the essence of the quality of the product to think about. But then on the flip side, I can also see, Jim, the point about, yes, developing the game. And say if Afghanistan was still going to Australia this summer, which unfortunately they're not, but would they have had more of a competitive game of cricket against an Australian A team than if they actually took on the likes of Cummins and Stark and Warner?
Yeah, so they would have, definitely. But look, the interesting bit of history, if I can just go back. When Sri Lanka became a test nation, they had no structured 3 or 4 day cricket in their country at all. And yet they produced some remarkable test cricketers. So I think we're going to get to a stage with so much congestion in the schedule whereby there'll be the top 6 nations will play test cricket and the rest will just play T20s and one days and franchise stuff. And there'll have to be some process for them to come forward, or maybe play a one-off, but it's just not going to work. Financially, it's not viable, and in terms of the schedule, it's just too punishing. There's not room for all these countries to play each other in every form of the game.
All right, I'm going to keep format away from this because, Alison, you did mention best teams versus the best, and of course, the top nations will pick their best team. Say the best Indian 15 will go to Australia to play test match cricket against the best 15 Australians. But there are so many other Indian Australians who are available, who are of almost similar standard, who can go to other nations and play other forms of cricket. I'll just mention one thing. Of course, you mentioned about Afghanistan. And yes, I think they need to play to be able to bolster their confidence. Anybody except the top 15, because you remember their inaugural test in India, it ended in 2.5 days. in Bangalore, matter of fact. So obviously you don't want to, demoralize new nations as well by putting them into the deep end and allowing to struggle. But and you mentioned, of course, Jim. You say that the schedule is going to be crowded. Well, I think there are too many people out there. We're all people of cricket, so perhaps we have a certain opinion. But there are too many people out there who say cricket. Well, come on, you guys, you just laze around the field most of the time. So I'm just saying, look at the tennis players, for instance. That's a brutal, hard, torturous game. Monday through Sunday, they're playing their guts out. And of course, they pick up their bags and jet off on a flight somewhere else, and they're again involved in some bruising, brutal battle the next Monday. So there are sports persons out there who ply their trade, very physically, day in, day out, week in, week out. So
try saying that to a test match bowler.
Well, yeah, well, come on. I mean, a test match bowler is not some, King Kong or whatever compared to one of the better tennis players, the squash players, or many other sports persons in the world who play virtually every day, very hard at the highest level. So let's also recognize that maybe, they get sufficient rest, or of course have this churn where more and more bowlers are therefore picked because somebody's feeling overworked. Let there be that churn as well. So, just something to think about.
I was going to say the bio-bubble cricket this summer, the test matches were back to back to back. So I wouldn't want to level that to Jimmy Anderson or Stuart Broad about player workloads. I guess at the moment, this is being brought about as a solution due to COVID-19 and the fact that time has been lost and there's now too much cricket to pack in. But very often once measures get put in place and you go down one route, it can be very difficult to U-turn and to recreate things as they were. So, yeah, this could well be the start of a direction in which things go. But I just hope that as much as possible, yes, T20 cricket can thrive, and also Test cricket, a game which gives us so much richness and depth, can also find a way to thrive alongside.